bit of a rumor roundup for the iPad 3 rumors because they're kind of culminating next week on Wednesday to be exact. Apple will have next week on Wednesday an event to unveil pretty much everything they have in store for us in regards to iPad 3, and perhaps they have a few other things up their sleeve. So let's begin. The first feature I'm going to talk about, or rumored feature, is the iPad 3's display. Well, the iPad 3 is rumored to have some kind of upgrade in terms of the resolution, but it's been kind of confirmed through part leaks and whatnot that it will have a Retina display similar to the iPhone 4 and iPhone 4S's display, in which you can't really discern the pixels. You have to actually look really hard to see the differentiation in the pixels. So it will be a huge upgrade if it is true. And here we have a leaked picture here of someone who got a hold of the iPad 3's display. They managed to compare both the iPad 3 and the iPad 2's, and well, as you can tell by the picture, there's a 4 times the amount of pixels. So that amounts to a total of a 2048 by 1536 resolution. That's actually even higher than the full 1080p Blu-ray, which would be incredible considering it's a small 9.7 inch display. So if this does happen to become true, the iPad 3's display will definitely be a game changer, and I can pretty much guarantee you that there will be a Retina display. The next thing I want to talk about is some kind of a design change. And if you want a new design, unfortunately, you're not in luck. The iPad 3,
It's 12:15.
The iPad 3 is rumored to keep the exact same design as the iPad 2. And actually, it's a bit of a deal breaker, but it supposedly will gain a couple more inches, or I don't know. I think, as you can tell, the iPad 2 is 86.9 millimeters, and the leaked iPad 3 chassis is 95 millimeters. So if you want a thinner or new looking iPad 3, unfortunately, it won't happen. The next thing that definitely will happen, though, is some kind of a processor upgrade. This is a picture that was leaked a few weeks ago on rumor sites that shows supposedly the motherboard of an iPad 3. And as you can tell, it does say A56. The previous processor, which was on the iPad 2, was just the A5. It was a dual-core processor. It was rumored that the next iPad would have a quad-core processor and that therefore be called an A6 rather than an A5X. And as you can tell here, that this was the rumored, the leaked picture, and it does say A5X, which points to an incremental upgrade, which means that it won't actually be quad-core. But if you do ask my opinion, I would say that this is actually the motherboard of the upcoming Apple TV that will also be revealed on the same event, which would have an A5X processor, which is technically the same processor as the iPad 2, but with improved graphics. Probably might have a higher clock speed. Now, the reason I believe that the iPad 3 will have a quad-core processor is because of this picture. This was, again, leaked, I believe, last week. And it does show, if you can read through it, that there's actually 2 processors that Apple developed throughout the iPad 3 release cycle. And that would be the A5X, which would be, I believe, that one, which is 45, and then the 50 over here, which is the A6. I could get into the details, but pretty much what that means is that there will be 2 kinds of processors, which, for my guessing, would mean that it would be for 2 different types of devices, which would mean the Apple TV versus the iPad 3. The next rumored feature would be some kind of an upgrade in terms of the camera. Again, here are 2 separate shots of the iPad 3's leaked design. On the left, you have the iPad 2's camera, and on the right, you have the iPad 3's lens, right? And again, this doesn't confirm anything, but the iPad 3's lens is slightly bigger, which proves that there at least have been some kind of tweaking in terms of the camera. Hopefully, it's been rumored that the iPad 3 will gain an improved back and front-facing camera. The back camera supposedly will be around what the iPhone 4S has, mainly to please data creation and movie editors and whatever. So if you do ask me, I don't think Apple would give it the exact same megapixels as the iPhone 4S, since they do want to sell the iPhone. And if they do give the iPad 3 the same amount of pixels, it'll detract from the iPhone 4's glamour and what people want from it. So I would imagine it would have around a 5 megapixel sensor, similar to the iPhone 4. Though I'm not sure. There hasn't necessarily been that many rumors suggesting the amount of megapixels. And as for the front-facing camera, it has been rumored that it will get a FaceTime HD camera similar to the ones on the MacBook Pros. They're slightly higher, maybe 1 megapixel. Again, that's just guessing, but I'm not sure. The next rumor feature is that the iPad 3 will gain LTE 4G capabilities. Again, I'm not sure about this. It has been rumored by reputable sources such as the Wall Street Journal, but what this means is that it will be able to download, if you do buy the 3G version, I believe like 10 times faster. Well, it's the new standard in wireless technology, the 4G LTE. And if it does come to the iPad 3, it would pave the way for it to be available for iPhone. So if it does come to the iPad 3, expect it to be on the iPhone 5 or iPhone 6, whatever it's called, whenever it is released. So hopefully it will be, as only AT&T and Verizon support it, I don't think they would support any of the 4G standards that Sprint or any of those other networks have. And now that we're talking about cellular networks, I would imagine that Apple would take a page from what they did with the iPhone 4S and make just one 3G model that engrosses all the cellular network providers. So there wouldn't be a CDMA version and a AT&T version. It'd just be one version for all of them, similar to the iPhone 4S. It'd just be a global thing. The next thing that I want to talk about is the fact that the iPad 3 will actually lose the home button. Honestly, there hasn't been any rumors suggesting this until Apple sent out the invite. So this year is the actual iPad 3 invitation given out to reporters and whatever. And pretty much Apple said we have something you really have to see and touch. And they have an iPad here. Again, I can assure you that this is the iPad 3, the one in the picture. Mainly because if you see this, again, this is a smaller version of the picture. If you want to see a more high resolution version of the picture, go on Google or whatever. But here you can tell that the Wednesday in the calendar, all the stuff here, is extremely high resolution. You can't really tell the pixels. And again, there's no home button, which is weird. Now you might be saying, well, the iPad's in landscape. Here's a comparison between an iPad in landscape and the one in the picture. So if you can tell, this is an iPad 2 in landscape mode. There's more spacing between the icons compared to the one here. So that means that the invitation picture, the iPad is obviously in portrait. And since there's no camera visible, that means that it has to be the right way up, which means there's no home button, which is very weird actually. Again, Apple could have just photoshopped it out to make it look cleaner, but why would they do that, And again, to prove that this is a picture of an iPad 3, not an iPad 2, here you can tell there's a lot of pixelation. You can discern the pixels. Now when you compare it to this picture over here, the iPad 3 invitation, there's no pixels. So that's really cool. Another thing that's been rumored is that the Apple will completely change the name of the iPad to iPad HD. In my opinion, that's an extremely ugly name. Why would you call it HD? And if it does gain the Retina display, it would actually be higher than HD, so it wouldn't technically be HD. So my guess is that it will remain as iPad 3. The only reason this rumor surfaced is that several case companies have put in their case names as iPad HD rather than iPad 3. Again, I don't think this will happen. It'll probably just be iPad 3, right? The next thing is Siri. This is pretty much confirmed that Siri will be coming to the next generation iPad. It's already on the iPhone 4S. People love it, and naturally Apple will have to port it over to the iPad 3. Now, the thing that people might use as a bit of a dispute in terms of this is that since you're using an iPad, you're not using it on the go like an iPhone, why would you need Siri, right? Yet again, Apple, they always do this kind of stuff. So even if you don't need it, it'll still be there. And besides that, there's actually been proof that Siri will be there. I didn't include a picture because I couldn't find it, but you can look it up somewhere in the internet. Another rumor has been that the iPad 3 will include iOS 6. I really don't think that will happen since developers right now have iOS 5.1, which is in a beta mode. So I would expect the iPad 3 to debut with iOS 5.1. The only reason that iOS 6 was rumored is because some people have been detecting that iPad 3 is running iOS 6. I've been visiting websites on the server logs. But yet again, it's probably Apple just testing out the next version of the OS. Here you go. Here's a picture that I meant, as you can tell. It does say an iPad running OS 6.0, which has an upgraded version of Apple WebKit compared to other versions. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is that it's also been rumored that Apple will include a new kind of accessory. It's unknown if it will be for the Apple TV or for the iPad 3, but in the store with the SKU serial numbers, there's a new one which refers to some kind of an accessory. Again, people have rumored that it will actually be an upgraded control for the new Apple TV, which will allow for Siri functionality. But since the control would naturally have to be included with the Apple TV, why would they have to sell it and therefore have a new SKU number? So I don't know what this might be. It might be a new case, some kind of a new smart cover that protects the back and the front. That's what I would like. But who knows? That's out there. I guess we'll have to wait till Wednesday to find out. Another rumor has said that Apple will also on Wednesday release some kind of an iPad mini. Honestly, I think that would be stupid. Steve Jobs himself said that the 9.7-inch display of the iPad is the best one, and anything lower than that would detract from its functionality, which is partially true. But here's a comparison of a concept picture created by Mac Rumors comparing a 7.8-inch, which is rumored the size of the display of the iPad mini versus the current iPad size, which shows that you can still technically use the UI without any kind of change, which is true. But I would imagine Apple will have to eventually release a cheap iPad, and of course the easiest way to do this is through a smaller version of it. But who knows? It is also rumored that Apple will continue selling the entry-level version of the iPad 2 for around $350, which doesn't compete with the Kindle Fire, which sells for, I believe, $200. So it's also rumored that the third quarter of this year, Apple will release the iPad mini. And I believe it was a Wall Street Journal, which is, again, a pretty reputable source in terms of rumors. Again, we're not sure. I wouldn't count on it since it doesn't make much sense. But who knows? Apple might surprise us. And of course, the last thing I will talk about is that Apple will also release some kind of an updated Apple TV. Again, this isn't the actual television that has been rumored for some time now. This is an upgraded version of the little box, like the one on the picture. Right? Who knows if they will actually change the design? Hopefully they will, because I was never really a fan of the design. It looks ugly. But it has been rumored that they'll include the new A5X chip that I just talked about, which would allow for 1080p, since the current Apple TV only runs 720p. And they'll also include Siri, supposedly. Who knows how they'll manage to include that? I'm not sure. And who knows what else? Guess we'll have to wait until Wednesday. So that's pretty much all I have for you guys today. I know I talked a lot. I made myself sound smart. I was just reading off a note card in case you were wondering. Yeah, I know. And but yeah, that's pretty much what I would imagine Apple will release on Wednesday and talk about. Any other rumor you hear about is bullshit. I'm just telling you now. What I tell you is the truth. Only the truth, okay? So don't pay attention to me. And also make sure to subscribe now that you're at it, you know? You already watched a 10-minute video, you might as well just subscribe, you know? So thanks for watching, and have yourself a nice day, I guess. Or night.